I want to ask you a question. Don't answer it yet. Hold it in the back of your mind for this entire video, because the answer is going to shift as we go. And by the end, your final answer is going to surprise you. Here it is. What actually made the richest people in history rich? Not what they said made them rich. Not the speeches, the books, the interviews. What actually did it? Because the story they told and the story that's true are not the same story. And the gap between those two is where most people's financial lives quietly fall apart. Hold the question. Let's go. John D. Rockefeller gave the same speech his entire life. To journalists, to his children, in churches and boardrooms and handwritten letters well into his 90s. Hard work, discipline, frugality, moral character, God's grace. The story of a man who simply outworked everyone and was rewarded accordingly. Now, Rockefeller became the wealthiest human being in recorded history. A fortune so large that adjusted for today, it sits between $400 and $600 billion, which makes the current richest people alive look like they're still warming up. When a man that wealthy tells you why he got wealthy, you listen. But here's what I need you to notice. Every person who built extraordinary wealth across history told a version of that same speech. Carnegie said persistence. Vanderbilt said vision. Gates said hard work and timing. Different words, same meaning. I earned this because of who I am. And when every single person across different eras, different countries, different industries tells the exact same story about why they won, that's not evidence the story is true. That's evidence the story is human. The historian Niall Ferguson studied the 50 wealthiest individuals in recorded history, not just their net worth, the actual structural conditions of how their wealth was created. The pattern was almost unsettling in its consistency. Almost without exception, these individuals arrived at the intersection of a new technology and an exploding market at the precise moment. The surrounding infrastructure made that intersection extraordinarily valuable. Rockefeller didn't discover oil. He arrived after the chaos, when the technology existed but nobody had organized it, and consolidated the entire refining industry at the exact moment America's industrial expansion created unlimited demand. 5 years earlier, the demand wasn't there. 10 years later, the consolidation was done. Carnegie and steel, not just steel, but steel at the precise moment America decided to build its entire railroad network. Gates, he said this himself, that 100 people could have been in his position. IBM needed an operating system in 1980 and, almost by accident, chose not to own it. That decision, made in a meeting Gates wasn't in, is worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Now remove the timing from any of these stories. Put Rockefeller in 1830. Put Gates in 1965. The legend never happens. So, what actually made them rich? If it wasn't purely them, we're getting closer. Nassim Taleb, the mathematician who spent his career studying randomness, describes it this way. Your brain takes a sequence of events and automatically reverse engineers a story that makes those events feel inevitable, logical, caused by identifiable things. Because your brain cannot tolerate randomness. Chaos feels like danger, so it builds a story instead. And the most seductive stories, the ones that get repeated, published, turned into books, are always the ones where the outcome was caused by the person's internal qualities. Their discipline, their vision, their character. The problem, Taleb found, these stories were almost universally incomplete. Not dishonest, incomplete. The people telling them genuinely believed them, which is exactly the problem. Because your brain isn't just telling this story to journalists, it's telling it to you about your life, right now. In World War II, the US military studied planes that returned from combat, mapped where the bullet holes were, and prepared to armor those areas. A statistician named Abraham Wald said, "You have it exactly backwards. The planes with bullet holes in those areas came back, which means getting hit there is survivable. The planes going down were getting hit somewhere else. You're seeing only the survivors and assuming they represent the whole picture. This is survivorship bias, and it is running at full speed in every financial conversation you've ever had. Every book about wealth is written by someone who made it. Every framework you've absorbed about money was handed to you by a survivor. You have never heard from the 1,000 people who had the same work ethic as Rockefeller and died broke. The entrepreneurs just as disciplined as Gates, who were building the right thing at the wrong time by margins that had nothing to do with their character. They don't get to give speeches. So the story you use to evaluate your own progress and to diagnose your own failures is built on incomplete data. We're at the answer now. What actually made the richest people in history rich? Timing they didn't control. Structural conditions they were born into or stumbled into. Luck distributed unevenly across people of roughly similar ability. And then the skill to recognize and exploit a window that most people missed. That last part is real. The work ethic is real. I'm not saying those things don't matter. I'm saying they were necessary but not sufficient. And here's why that matters. Because this is not philosophical. If you believe wealth is primarily a product of character and discipline, the story you've been told your entire life, then when you struggle financially, your brain has exactly one explanation available. Something is wrong with me. Not the timing, not the market, not the structural conditions of the industry you're in, not the possibility that you're building something real at the wrong moment. You. And that story, the one that turns economic outcomes into moral verdicts about your worth as a person, is the most expensive story ever told because it aims you at the wrong problem entirely. It makes you grind harder on your character when you should be thinking smarter about your positioning. Rockefeller wasn't wrong to work hard. He was wrong about why it worked. And if you're building your financial life on a story that history's wealthiest people told about themselves, a story we now know is incomplete, you might be armoring the wrong parts of the plane. The question was, what actually made them rich? The answer is a combination of factors, most of which they couldn't see, some of which they couldn't control, and none of which they fully admitted. Which means the real question, the one actually worth your time, is whether you're brave enough to look at your own financial life with the honesty they never managed. Think about that.